quando è stato detto tutto più o meno, cerchiamo cerchiamo.
Sì, no, è chiaro che se riuscissimo a riassumere tutto alla fine è meglio ancora.
Sì, perché sennò ho paura che la gente faccia troppo casino, sai. Allora Giacomo, andiamo così che quando entrano io gli dico, cioè tu glielo dici a tutti quanti, che vanno tutti dentro muti e poi gli diciamo che tu li unmute, che se loro vogliono, così possono introdurre e facciamo quelle 2 righe di 2 minuti di presentazione. Ne abbiamo 6 in attesa, ma meglio di prima, francamente. No, Dio, meglio di prima. C'è anche Angela, immagino che sia tua collaboratrice.
Quella magari falla entrare, dai, così.
Ah sì, scusa, adesso l'ho vista adesso. Si sta venendo dentro. Aspetta, Giacomo, che ti devo dare. Aspetta, make cost, Giacomo. Ok, aspetta che Angela la unmute.
Hi Angela.
Hey Angela, welcome. Angela, you're probably muted.
Non riesco a fare unmute però,
Angela?
Va bene, dillo pure tu, Giorgio, così siamo sicuri che...
Okay, Angela, can you hear us? Apparently we cannot hear you. Nod with the head if you do.
No, direi di no.
No.
Secondo me non ci sente neanche.
Vabbè.
Mia tanto mi va bene, cioè...
Vabbè, adesso...
Aspetta, siamo qua, Angela. Io non riesco a...
I did the mic and audio test.
I did the mic audio test before, it was both work, but... Quindi?
Io non riesco, non ho il pulsante per. No, io non ho la possibilità di ammutarla.
No, ma il problema è che non sente.
Aspetta, bro. I did mic auto test before I was brought in and they both cannot hear anyone and I cannot unmute.
No, ma non...
Dice che non sente nessuno.
Non sente, non sente.
Gli ho scritto di uscire e di rientrare.
Sì. Però provo a buttarla fuori, vediamo se riusciamo a mettere in... Abbiamo 12 persone in attesa.
Ok, è uscita lei o l'hai buttata fuori tu?
No, è uscita lei. Beh, ne abbiamo 12 adesso, quindi siamo già...
Bene, siamo già più di prima.
Di prima.
Allora, cominciamo a chiedere un po' chi sono, cosa fanno, no?
Sì,
detto?
sì. Oh, digli, senti una cosa, se non riusciamo a mutare, dici se qualcuno che non riesce a farlo, non riesce a entrare, 16, che aspettano.
Sono tanti che tutti si presentano, qua si annoiano, se no. Vediamo quanti...
Sì, può essere.
Giorgio, fai così secondo me, gli dici che praticamente all'inizio noi praticamente...
Qua, Angela, aspetta che la rimetto dentro, admit.
Tu, secondo me fai così Giorgio, dici pure che fai la spiegazione tutto quanto, i microfoni restano unmute, quindi praticamente...
Io non riesco a vederla Angela, non riesco a...
Sì, io la vedo.
Angela? Sì, no, ma non ho il tasto unmute per lei, cioè non...
Hello.
Ok.
Sono tutti quanti unmute adesso, ci penso io, Maria Vittoria.
Va bene, perfetto.
C'è il tasto mute all e unmute all. Lei adesso potrebbe parlare, in teoria, se ne sente. Però.
I can hear everybody now.
Oh, that's great.
Hi, Angela.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. I'm the black one.
Yes, I decided to take a chance and show my face. I didn't know if I would be visible or not, but...
Listen, there are 20 people waiting. What are we doing? Are we starting or?
We start is at 12 o'clock. So yeah, we do the introduction like we did before.
Okay, so I'll start and then I meet everybody. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Start.
Hello. I don't know if you can all hear me. Okay, now, sorry, thank you. A little bit of a technical glitch at the beginning. It's 12 o'clock. I believe you're all muted. Feel free to raise, probably because, you know, from technology standpoint, we would like to have this a little bit of an interaction in the chat among friends. I'm not here pretending to give any lesson to anybody, but basically sort of give an explanation on who we are, the origin of our quarries, and you know.
They changed they pushed my doctor appointment. Wow, I can't hear you. Are you on mute? Is it already in?
Wow, we have quite a few people here. I see some old friends. I see some new ones. Nice. Like I said, probably I think the best is to mute you all during the course of the presentation. But I don't know if you're familiar with Zoom. You have a chat box. You can raise your hands. Worst case scenario, just unmute yourself and jump in. Don't be shy. Like I said, the intent of this conversation, of this chat, is sort of get together. We are stuck at home. We might as well meet other people. Low, but we got a good reception, so we broke it up in two different groups. So this is the second group, and this is the first of the ideas to make 4 different talks on the history of Palladio and the use of his hour stone, basically in his masterpiece. So, Maria Vittoria, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay, just I want to introduce you and introduce, you know, the host primarily, and then ideally we would like to have a little bit of background on who you are. Like I said, I recognized a couple of the names. I see some of them. Many of you, we don't really know, you know, who you are or what's your background or what is your interest. That it would be nice if you could, you know, give a little bit of info about you so that we can better fine-tune the presentation or even suggestions for the next time. Maria Vittoria is the owner of Grassi Pietre and is a quarry factory company. I don't know how best to describe it. Established in the 1881, I believe. Maria Vittoria, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Hi, you're right, you're right. So hello to everybody. I don't know most of you, but I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me more or less, yeah?
Yes.
So yes. I'm based in Vicenza in Italy, and that's the quarry, you know, Giorgio, we talk about our quarries and our reality today. And I'm sorry you cannot be here, but that's a way to keep connected anyway. And let's hope next time we can hear directly.
I'm sorry too, that I cannot be there.
Giacomo is also working for Grassi Pietre, and the other mastermind behind this event. He helped me putting together this speech. Giacomo, if you want to say a few words about you.
Yeah, I'm not so mastermind because I'm not able to use my camera. So I'm the one on the black mirror, you know, but maybe black is the new black. So join us anyway.
Angela is my assistant. She's been working at Atlantic Link, I don't know for how long, quite a bit now. We've always been working remotely, and we met once, right?
Yes, that's correct.
In 10 years, so I don't know how long we've been working together. We just got the luxury. She lives in Massachusetts. I live here in New Jersey. So we've been using the remote work since then. So you know, we adjust pretty well to the new situation, although we, you know, we suffer like everybody. I miss going out, I miss traveling, I miss meeting people in person, but I think this is the best we can do. Like I said, I mean, feel free to interact or to chat. I'll start this presentation. I want to give another few minutes for other people to join in. I think a decent group. If you want to stay unmuted, probably we're going to mute you only if we have a bad background noise or, you know, dogs barking in the background. And let me know if I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow. It's sort of my first time. And presenting online, I have to say, is not as easy as presenting live because you sort of lack the interaction of people. And you have to juggle with many tools. I kind of experienced that on the first presentation. So I apologize if it doesn't come as well as you expected. Anyway, to get started, let's first give you a geographic reference of where we are, what we're talking about. And I did this on a Google map. If you can see, here is my little logo. On Google, I basically Google Grassi Pietre, and this is the address that you can get. I'll give you a little bit of a reference because during the course of this presentation that I'm planning to, you know, to last about 20, 40 minutes max, depending also on, you know, how well I'm doing or how much interaction we are getting. Okay, somebody's muted to avoid background, that's fine. So I was saying, okay, this is where we are. The red circled area is the majority of the presentation will be focused in this geographic region. And because we are talking about stone and we're talking about marble, you know, we can't ignore Massa Carrara and Forte dei Marmi. You know, you can't talk about marble without that name popping up in the first 20 seconds of the conversation. Venice was a very prominent and very important city back in the 1800s, which is the time when Andrea Palladio you know, did most of his masterpieces. Turin was the capital of Italy in the 1800s too. And when I did this, when I prepared this slide, I wasn't really thinking too much about the consequences. So I sort of forgot about putting Turin in the pictures, but it's just a little bit left on the screen, which is going to be west on the Padana Valley. So this is the Padana Valley. As you can see, these will be the Alps and these are the Apennines. And back in the beginning of time, this was all the Adriatic Sea. This, you know, going back to my time in the elementary school, was all sediment carried over by the river coming down from the Alps and the Po River. Looking at the map, you will see these whiter spots on the mountains. You know, I assume these are snow-capped peaks because of the Alps. You will see the same effect here in Massa, but because of the Apuani Alps, or the Apennines, these are the Apennines, which is the backbone of Italy, do not reach the altitude of the Alps. While these, I suspect there are snow, down here is actually the effect of the marble. I prepared another slide where you will see a close-up, and what I did, I basically just click on the arrow. I cannot do it here because it's a picture, but it's just a close-up of the same pictures. So now I didn't even realize, but clicking on the image is sort of give it to the next slide. This is presenting the most typical situation that we are doing today. So the same spot, and now I went in the same Google. I put in the address, and also I put the quarry Cave Acque Uno. This is one of the quarry and probably the most used quarry. There's 6, I believe, altogether that are in the Grassi portfolio. Each quarry has its own peculiarity in terms of stone, capacity of extraction, technical characteristics, and so forth. But they're pretty much all located in the same 14 kilometers, so it's a little bit shy of 10 miles radius from the factory. The other important part is Nanto. Nanto is actually where the very first quarry was. The quarry is still open, but I believe just because it was one of the very first one, it's sort of been quarried, quote unquote, badly, because back then the tools were not as sophisticated, as efficient as today's tools. So with today's insights, we wouldn't be quarrying the same way, and there's a lot of wastage over there. So yeah, the quarry is still there, still being used for some purpose of reason that I can't recall right now, but the majority of the material will come from this and few other quarries. But Nanto is also the name of the stone. Palladio also called it Pietra di Nanto. And that, of course, explain why the factory is located here, because 14 kilometers is a long distance to travel back in the ages, and we'll see more in details during the presentation. Today's, you can see there's only 20-minute ride, and it's actually a nice, enjoyable ride. Not much traffic here. So going into quarries, we'll also talk about two types of quarries. And, Google is really helping nowadays in doing our own research. And I would say 50% of this presentation was sort of on the spur of the moment in deciding on how to do it and what to talk about. And the other 50%, I stole in a previous presentation that Grassi did more on the history of their quarries and on the stone. So this, you will see that some are screenshot and some other a little bit more professional slides. But this is the National Geographic description of what is a quarry. A quarry is a place where rocks, sands, or mineral are extracted from the surface of the earth. There are two types of quarries. National Geographic call it subsurface mine, which is typical of the Pietra di Vicenza. I hear it more tunnel quarries, but I don't dare to change the National Geographic definition. So I put it both terminologies. And you can see, and this is exactly the same pinpoint that I did before with the distance. The point of this shot is that from an aerial view, you don't really see much. So if I didn't pinpoint it here, it will look like any other landscape or any other regions. Now we go to the other quarry, the open pit mine quarry. And if you recall the first Google Map screenshot, this is exactly the area that I was showing you by clicking on the arrow here. I went closer and closer, and all the way until you actually see the little roads. These are actually inside the quarry. So these are quarry streets. You can see here that are the roads outside the quarry. The mountains here are about 1,000 meters, so 3,000 feet. I didn't do the conversion exactly, but I think it's a good approximation. Beautiful ride. I did it once on a motorcycle. I live, and I used to live from the Reggio Emilia and Modena regions. I came here as a tile guy, a tile and porcelain guy, and slowly but surely, my year of experience, the stone sort of crept in more and more. But back then, Forte dei Marmi was a great destination to go to, especially on a sunny summer weekend. And I'm a big motorcycle guy, so going through this windy road is fun, I can guarantee you. Also enjoyable from the landscape. I haven't toured that much Veneto. I admit my ignorance, and I only did it more often recently, but only for business. So I took a lot of the highway, but not many of the country roads. I'll promise, and I will do more. Actually, last time I went to visit Grassi, which is about an hour and a half from my original hometown on the highway. It's about an hour and 45 minutes without the highway, just going and cutting through all the farmlands and county roads. You know, since the distance is more or less the same, time-wise, it's actually a more enjoyable ride. And so I actually did once. And this is the landscape that you get, much beautiful, you know, much more beautiful than just riding along the highway. You can see these hills, you can see churches, all the houses, lakes, vineyards, and so forth. So it is a great destination also, or a day getaway if you, you know, if you are visiting for business, you know, buying stone or, you know, whatever your profession will take you to Italy. Even tourists, typically, you know, the typical spot are Venice, Florence, Rome, but there's a lot of hidden jewelry. Vicenza, I would say, is typical one. Probably is overshadowed by Venice. I mean, if you have one day, you probably will pick Venice, but I can guarantee you that if you pick Vicenza for once, you will not be disappointed, and you will see more later on. So Palladio, which is, you know, the topic of this event that we'll be talking about, is a famous architect that is characteristics for his style, started after the Renaissance and before the Baroques. Many buildings, even the United States, are inspired, if not designed, by Palladio. The Thomas Jefferson, the White House. I admit I didn't do a lot of research if the White House was actually designed by Palladio. I don't believe so, but I believe it was inspired by the Palladio architecture. But anyway, Villa Rotonda and many other Palladian villas that are in the proximity of Vicenza, or between Vicenza and Padua, where Palladio was born, is actually a great example of architecture. You can tour this villa. I don't even remember. I did it once, and actually I did it with the Torchiello. Is a boat. It's sort of an organized tour that starts, I can't recall if it was Vicenza or was Padua or some little town in between, that with a little, on a little canal, you're going on this river boat, and you're really sailing through small towns, stopping at restaurants. Back then were open, of course, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, so, you know, forgive my memory. And you will stop along this villa, so you can visit the villa. You know, the garden or the farmland around that are very nice, and are those kind of tour guides that are not really on the mainstream of the typical tourist, or, you know, I would say probably not the American tourist. But if you do a little research, I would strongly recommend doing that. And it's only a day thing. Vicenza is another perfect setting for a day or two, or for a weekend in town. This is downtown, I believe. You can see here the Piazza dei Signori columns. This is the Basilica Palladiana, probably one of the most famous architecture of Palladio. This is the rooftop. I remember sitting here, and there was a bar and serving aperitif overlooking the square. And, you know, especially in times like season now is, you know, hopefully not as rainy as it is here in Jersey, but you can really enjoy that. The Teatro Olimpico, I believe, is on the left down here. So anyway, still a walking distance. And like I said, I mean, it can be a very leisure afternoon stroll, doing some shopping and looking at architecture. And, you know, it can be just a 2-hour stop. Is really worth it. Or you can spend 2-3 days if you really want to go deep into the architecture of Palladio. Now, besides this tourist site, we are going now more on a presentation of the formation of the stone, where it all started. And here is another little quick research I did online on sort of to remind myself also about what I studied you know, about prehistories and the formation of our planets. I couldn't really remember also a number that is difficult to comprehend. It sounds like the $1 trillion that Trump is giving away. I mean, 3,500 million years ago. I can't count. But this is when the earliest life started on this planet. And that means that the planet started even earlier than that. The era, or actually the formation of the Berrichi Hills actually happened in this era here, which is very close to the coming to life of the human species, so 1.6 million of years ago. And you know, the expert further break it down into Oligocene and Eocene. I just put this reference because you will see it later on the slides. But quite honestly, I don't pretend to teach you how to go too much into details on that. What is the most interesting part is this graph here that shows the temperature of Earth from inception all the way to today. So if this is 0 temperature, so basically a cold winter day, you can see that we went from the Eocene, and this is the era of the formation, so one of the hottest time, if not the very beginning. And you will see that the Padana Valley back then was not a valley, it was more like the Gulf of Mexico. All the way to the coldest climate here, where it was the first glaciation with the dinosaurs extincted. So, you know, talking about the global warming, we of course have a lot of way to go, but if we go to that extreme, we probably not be looking at the Earth the way it is, but more of the tropic, when you're looking at the Bologna or Verona. So Berrichi Hills started, like I said, 50 million years ago, and this is the era called Eocene. And like I said, it's sort of like, think about the Gulf of Mexico or the tropics, where you have shallow waters, you have volcanoes underneath, small volcanoes. This formation started, or this gulf, because the Padana Valley, you know, if you remember the very first map, was all flooded by the Adriatic Sea. Slowly but surely start getting filled from debris that are carried down the Alps by the rivers, and these debris and the marine sediment started the formation of and basically the ingredients that eventually will make the limestone. Fossils element and larger pieces called the nummulites. And I don't think if this is the correct translation in English, but basically this is what they are. So these are bigger fossils that we still find nowadays. So these are actually collected not in the prehistory time, like you would probably see in the, you know, in the National Geographic or in the museum. But these are actually being collected when we are digging new blocks from the quarries. Actually, the old stone is all made of this. So many, you know, when we're cutting the blocks, we just crush and cut through them. And only the bigger ones are the ones that we collect and we bring to the showrooms and we can showcase. By the way, we just, Grassi just renovated the showroom. So hopefully when things reopen up and it's possible to travel, if you are in Italy, there's no need that I need to invite you. And we'll love to organize events where we can do tours. We usually do in conjunction with the Verona Fair, which is the biggest exhibition, definitely in Italy and in Europe, I don't know if in the world, which happen typically towards the end of September, beginning of October. Where a lot of people are a lot of people from our industry travel there, but you know, we are open all year round. So whenever you are in Italy, let us know, and we'll love to invite you there. Then 20 million years later, so before we were at 50 million years, now we are at 13 million years ago. is another era of the Oligocene. The Oligocene is a new version. I forgot to mention, in the previous era, the formation of the stone, we actually form 5 different colors. We have 6 altogether. The gray and the yellow are the ones that were formed in the Eocene era. And those are stone composed by calcium carbonate, with majority of the limestone that is available in the world today, but a lot of inorganic material, a lot of iron content. And the iron is the one that gives the grayish and the yellowish ochre tonality. So when the iron oxides, turn towards the yellow, and when it doesn't oxide, remain more on the gray tones. And that's why our color palette goes from the white, which is the stone we are talking about in these slides, to the yellows and gray that we talked in the previous one. Now, the difference, and again, there's a considerable difference between these and the previous one, is because this being formed 20 million years later is more composed of organic material. So here, on top of having some of the sediment that were part of the previous formation, we have many more coral reef and many more fish sediments, skeletons. So this is the formation of the Vicenza white stone, or the what we call nowadays the Bianco Avorio. And this white, specifically for this reason, there are more invertebrate material than organic material. They also create a finer granulometry. Of course, you know, at the microscopic level, you will notice this difference. But again, the major difference is based because these 2 different components, like organic material prevalent to the inorganic. Here is another way of looking at the sedimentation of the material and how the hills basically start to form and come out from the Adriatic Sea. Like any sediment material, the word itself says it is basically a stratification of different layers, and these layers create horizontal levels, which we'll see later on is the way we are basically digging the material out of the ground. We see also some karsting happening in this quarry, and all other elements that will go a little bit more in details later on. We can't ignore about the different family, talking about the different family. Then the major macro family of stone are the igneous, the metamorphic, and sedimentary. And again, you can see here was just a quick Google search. You can find more about that. But just to describe it, the igneous stone are the hardest one that come from the core of the earth, and are mainly made of magma, so granite, basalt. The metamorphic are an evolution of the sedimentary. The sedimentary, basically all the limestone are sedimentary, and we go more in detail in the presentation, so I don't spend too much time here, but it's basically what I just said, are inorganic material and coral reefs and earth that basically is crushed together and put into layers. These layers, over a million years later, sediment and being compressed, turn into metamorphic. The metamorphic process changed the chemical composition of the stone. So from limestone turn into marble. So marble technically is a harder material, but the advantage of limestone has some aspect that is less affected by acid. So not necessarily the hardest is the best. It's not here the point to go too much into details about these differences, because we are planning, like I said, 3 other events talking about the stone and talking about Palladio, we'll go more into details about the different characteristics, how we cut it and how we use it. These are picture of what will be today's slabs. So you'll see the white, pretty uniform here. You see the yellowish, where the fossils and the elements are a little bit more prevalent. And the same, this is another version of yellows. And these are the grays, where again, you can see a little bit more of these bigger fossils present in the stone. And so these are the yellow here. The rock or the quarry. This can perfectly be an example of how many centuries ago a quarry was started, was open. You basically see also here there are already some holes because back in the time people just were building houses. Maybe this is a house that was built after the very first quarry was started. But basically the bottom line is people see these walls of rocks, start cutting and digging them and using for architecture, using for stone, using for bricks, using for walls, or so forth. Stone has been used here. We have traces, of course, since the Romans. The Romans, actually, there's a town called Custoda, which is actually very nearby. Custoda takes its name from the word custody. Custody because back then the Romans used to close the slaves into these tunnels. So that's why custody Custoda. Basically the Romans, nice people, just kidnap everybody, put them in jail into this quarry and beat them to death until they cut the stone. That's how they did the Colosseum and all the other structure. Anyway, without the railing too much into history. The Berici Hills, this would be the view that you see nowadays. And you can see that, first of all, the height is not, it's not a lot, only 1,400 feet. So that's why they're called hills, not mountains. And they're all a combination of upland and valley. There's a handful of valley, all very close by. You can see that although it is a grand angle shot or a wide shot, it's a pretty much narrow valley from here to here. Technically, it can be a walking distance, maybe a nice day hike, you can do it. And they're sort of pretty much all grouped into this little section. And here is the way that quarry was done back in the time. These are terminology that are being taken, like the costozza, again, the derivation is from custodia and from custody from the Romans. Senjo is, I believe, is the dialect here. So many of them I wouldn't probably know where it comes from, but Senjo, I think, is sort of rocks. And maybe at the end, Giacomo and Maria Vittoria can give a little bit more details on where they come from. Tirada, that I can guess, because in Italy, if you say the terminology pull is tirare. So tirada is how they call the very first block, which is the most difficult one, because look at yourself like, facing a wall and trying to get a block out of this wall. The very first one is not so simple. Once you open the hole, you can easily dig into the others. Bora is this stone here on the right, and binda is this jackhammer that is basically used to lift the main block, sit on top of the stone and put it in position to be able to transport down to valley. We'll talk a little bit later into the transport, but this again is an idea of a senjo, how it looked like, and basically how you will like if you want to start, and if you had the license to open a new quarry, you will be standing in an area like this, looking at the rock and start, deciding on which way do you start digging. You do here or you do here. Once you decided, you basically start into the tunnel. This are elements that you can see highlight the challenge of digging and cutting back then with hand tools. And that's why, I mean, probably from here to here were a few months of excavation. Attachment here for cranes and hooks. And this is the typical image of a tunnel quarry. I mean, I don't know about you, how many of you are actually in the industry, how many of you went to a quarry, but if you, at least for me, I mean, majority of my quarries, and not that I've been to many, but probably, you know, a good handful of quarries have been all open quarries. The Grass is the only one I've been, you know, the luxury of visiting as a tunnel quarry, and it's pretty impressive. And this is why we also call those cathedrals, because you feel like you're inside a majestic cathedral, because the pillar, because of the vaults, are giving you this impressive environment. And it's probably even more interesting, the old quarries, than the newer one. This is an example of the old quarry. In a way, it's a kind of a messy environment, because you have very irregular lines all over the place. The reason is because it wasn't easy to cut stone back then. So all these lines up here on the ceiling are all different way of cutting and extracting material. The pillar here is sort of, you know, how to go around, or sometimes just too hard material to cut. So just move around them. Other blocks sitting here, I mean, this is marked to be. Hello? Okay. This is a block that was marked for some purposes, basically to be taken away later, or being just left there because some irregularity or some difficulties. You will see a lot of chisel mark and signatures in many of these quarries. Again, other tools, just to show you how challenging was back then to take material down and to take it to market. And sometimes we have the luxury of looking at stone and just considering, give me a color and give me the price. And, here people will leave a leg maybe behind one of these stone. Luckily, not as much nowadays. But you still see some older generation of people working in the quarry with, missing limbs or missing fingers, or was certainly not a safe environment back then. And this is how the blocks were transported down to valley, and so we oxen. Some were even how you call it, pull with a sledge, and these are the mark here. Usually in these mud street or gravel street, we'll put wooden beam. The beam were some often greased with some grease, just to give it a little bit more to reduce the friction and try to find a way to get the material down. Consider that back then the oxen were primarily used in agriculture, so not always were available. It's not like nowadays. So also the way to quarry was kind of unique, primarily more on maybe on the weekend, because it's when the farmer were not working in the fields, or more in the winters where agriculture was a lower level of activities. While in the quarry, coincidentally, because you're underground, the temperature is very mitigated. So even if it's very cold outside, you are very in a nice, safe, and comfortable environment to work with. So there were also these little challenges that we don't think about in nowadays, but were a factor back then. This is interesting because I think it's probably the very first example of marketing of stone. think about stone, and the same thing sort of happened nowadays when, first of all, stone is not a material like, I don't know, a software. You know, you can buy your license on Microsoft and have it instantly transfer from Seattle to Tokyo to wherever you buy it in a second. Stone is something that is heavy today's, even heavier back then because of the means of transportation. So stone was primarily a very local region. That's why there were so many quarries back then, because there was a demand. But the demand, of course, the Berice Hills is like a remote area if you consider about Italy in the 1800s, where the capital back then was not Rome, but was Turin. And Turin is, you know, if you remember the very first slide, is the town that they sort of forgot to include it, because when I prepared the presentation and we are already towards the end, I wasn't thinking at the beginning to include Turin. But if you think Turin, it can be like New York City or Chicago it is today for the United States. This is where the majority of the demand for stone is, but the quarries are not necessarily in the proximity of New York City or Chicago. There are quarries in Vermont, there are quarries in Indiana, there are quarries in Arizona. And yes, now it's certainly easier to transport the stone, but we can build and we can design with stone because we know we have access to the stone and we know how to get it from Arizona, from Vermont or from Carraro, or from hopefully from Grassi to here. We know it nowadays, but back then it wasn't that easy. So this was the very first inventory in a way of the quarries, so that they could go to Turin and say, hey, you need to build this, so we can offer you our stone. And the quarry were actually, I don't know the terminology in English, but basically listed by the capacity of the quarry, by the number of employees working in there, how big is the stream or of the vein of material that had in there. So it's also a way to value the land and the quarry, because of course, the more a quarry can produce, the more its value. But also, it was also the proximity to the train station, because the easier it was to transport to where you needed, the more valuable the material was. So it was estimated that back then there were about 50 quarries open with 334 employees working there. Probably now we have 34 employees working for the same capacity. And this was also an idea when the Longwood Garden started demanding the material. I don't know if you've been to the Longwood Garden, but I strongly recommend it. I wasn't that much into stone back then, and I wasn't working with Grassi when I visited the Longwood Garden 7, 8 years ago. I don't know, I don't remember, my kids were young. And it's a very nice, interesting garden, just outside of Philadelphia. For those of you that are in the region, by the way, at the end, I would like to understand where you're all joining us from. I would strongly recommend it. It's a nice visit, especially in the spring. Yeah. But if you go on their website, and you can see is up here is the website. This is the Pietra di Vicenza, quarry from Italy. And if you can recall the previous picture, and you will see some other pictures, were pretty much the same picture that I will show you. So yes, the Longwood Garden is a perfect example, and I'm using them a lot as a reference in my presentation, because it's a project that we have here. Is a project that has some history, because of course everybody's afraid of how much does it last. Can I put in exterior? Does it withstand the snow, the cycle, the ice? Well, I mean, what the best example than having more than 100-year history, recently be renovated. So another great example, a great use of stone is not only that, as you can see here, any little detail can be carved into stone. And I keep on saying, if we do statue, we can do pretty much anything on a stone. It's just a matter of time and money, like anything. But it's relatively simple to do it in stone, that, you know, probably simpler than you might think, especially with today's technology. The other good thing about stone is that 100 years later, you can find the same stone. So if one of these get damaged, you don't get the next one that looks, I don't know, blue or yellow. It looks pretty much the same as the one that were originally being installed. So these are just a few shots. You can find them more, of course, going online or by visiting in person. Back then, these were the rudimental tools that were used. I don't want to spend too much time on this because, again, this will be part of another seminar that we're planning to do. And, you know, hopefully you can join us for that one too. But this is the first rudimental gang saw. You will see the modern one are completely different technology. But the bottom line, they're all operating in the same way. These are the 6 quarries that you know, Grassi is extracting nowadays, and you can see this is the same valley that you saw, you know, at the beginning of the slide in that grand angle pictures, and this is giving you the giacimento. I don't know how to translate that in English, but the capacity of the quarry is these blue marks you can see here, and you will see better in another slide where from here you will see actually how the here it is, how the quarry is actually laid out, where you see here is the entrance and here is another entrance, and basically it's working like a chessboard on an horizontal level. Horizontal because if you remember at the beginning, the stratification sort of happened in layers. So all this material has horizontal levels. So usually when you start, and the same concept is work like you're doing a tunnel in the highway, you basically start on one side and you go all the way to the others. The difference from the highway tunnel is that here we have multiple tunnels going in all different directions, usually in an orthogonal way. The advantage and disadvantage from the open tip and the closed tip. The main advantage is you just have to dig, and basically what you dig, you carried it out. So you don't have to worry about removing all the dirt that you find on top, and that depending on the height of the mountain can be quite a lot. The main disadvantage, you have to leave quite a bit of material. Usually it's estimated that 30% of what is left in the quarry once is technically all exhausted is 50%, is another 50% of material. So we only using half of the capacity because 30% are the pillars and another 20% are the ceiling, so that the mountain doesn't fall on people working underneath. Here is the typical example of an entrance. So you will see the same shots that we saw at the beginning. Here are the 4 dots that were positioned. I asked Grassi to highlight that because there's no way that you can recognize it, even if you just walk by or drive by, or if you don't pay attention, you would just ignore this. But this is actually a quarry, and inside here you will see a picture later. There's quite a bit, and you can see that. Just to close it is just a gate and maybe a few trees once you completely terminated. This is the view from the inside. This is definitely an old quarry. You can see from the ceiling here where there's, and also this pillar, you can see how irregularly it has been carved out. And although there's a machine, it's because, of course, we keep on extracting if the material in the quarry allows, we keep extracting on the same quarries. So this is a nice one because a combination of new technology. You will see, of course, the caterpillars, the lights, the ventilation, which 100 years ago, I don't think were that available. So think also the perspective of many buildings that you're seeing nowadays, that, how much sweat it took to do it and to build it. This is the today's technology. Certainly a much easier and simple process, much safer. Many of these machines are actually remote controlled, so that if eventually something falls in the unlikely event, and more than luck, I would say miscalculation, like any project, I like to do the analogy of, for those of you who are architects or engineers, when you're building a house, a structure, an office, you need to have calculation to make sure that you know, the second floor doesn't fall on the first floor. Same concept is actually the reverse here. Instead of building, we are subtracting, but we still need to do those engineering calculation to make, actually even more here, to make sure that the second floor doesn't really fall on the first floor, because we are working underneath what's on top. So it's actually even more challenging here because we are subtracting instead of adding. But like I said, luckily with today's technology, it's so much faster and simpler. It's less empirical than it was back then. But the concept and the logic is still the same. So you are, you know, standing here in front of a wall, and you have to go feet and feet into this wall to extract the block. So how do you do it? Well, you start making this grid or drawing this grid, and with this chainsaw, start digging into the material, first on the horizontal, and starting from the top all the way down, because of course you're using gravity and the laws of the nature as much as possible. Try to work if there's a vein, if there's a crack on the mountain, you know, of course use that instead of cutting. But once you can't, just use the machinery. So bottom line is, like, you are cutting for channels, for lines across this wall until you basically achieve a parallelepiped that is detached from the main building, and the only face is the one in the back. You will basically try to crack. Stone has a lot of strength, there's a lot of technical characteristics, and definitely compression is one of the main ones. This is why it's been used in architecture. But like cement, has a very weak strength when it's flexed. So the more you can open this joint and trying to bend, the more challenge you will have to break the back face. And like I said, I mean, this is the most challenging one. Once you open the first hole and you go inside it, it's certainly easier to dig the one next to that. Once you moved a few feet apart, then you have to, I mean, once you moved in a few more feet, or maybe 30 feet, like you will see this area here, then you have to start digging on the floor. I mean, of course, if the material is available. Again, typically you start from the top and you start to dig all the way down as much as you can. Think about the vein or the strand of the material. Typically is about 10 feet, so, you know, 8 to 10 meter, so 10 to 30 feet wide by length, you know, and the depth, of course, is hopefully, I don't know, not miles, but hopefully half a mile to a mile, as much as possible, of course. And this is basically how you process. Like you did the first block on the wall, you are going to do the first block on the floor. So once you got the first one out, then it's a little bit easier to get the others. This is the example of a more modern quarry. You can see the comparison with the previous one. Everything is much more perfectly aligned, more geometric, cleaner, simpler, wider. And because here we really exploit the quarry to the maximum that is physiologically possible. Of course, the pillar need to remain, but other than that, we'll use all the material. There's no leftover blocks, and nothing is hard enough to be carried away and being used. And this is another shot from another angle that can very well be any warehouse where, again, you see the blocks are identified by dates, by the bench, so that we know where it comes from, what's the next one, what's the proximity, what's the color. No more axes and carts, but big caterpillars and trucks that can carry multiple blocks at the same time. And this is the example of a quarry when it runs out. It's basically an empty hole, and we try to restore it and to close it for safety reason, of course, and to restore it for environmental reason, just by replanting trees and you know, facing it up. So once you're done, you pretty much, the quarry exploited its purpose, but there's still other uses that can be done to quarries. So quarries have multiple lives. One is storages, and because it's underground, what a perfect environment to use it for material that needs constant humidity, constant temperature, that exposed to light might change and might deteriorate. So here you can see a mushroom cultivation, but there's also other example, photo shooting. We did from a lighting company ask, you know, these are challenges. Why have to recreate you know, a black chamber when there are in natural life, and is giving you, of course, this more natural situation than an ascetic room that you will have in the back of your house. Shooting for safety material, that's another example that has been used, as well as concert and events. It's certainly a challenging and impressive situation to have a concert. I never experienced the concert, so I can't talk about that, but definitely being inside the quarry is an experience. Speleology. In one of these quarries, there's actually hidden creeks. There are stalactite and stalagmite, and you know, the more the merrier. And why not wine cellar? What's the best place, if not underground, to store wines? Last but not least, restaurants. You know, you have the wine right next to that. You might as well drink it while you're there. We did actually, the municipality did a museum, so restored the one ancient quarry, and this is another good example for school, but also for architects that are in the area to experience how was the history of working with the material. Grassi has also its own museum, and you know, if you are in the area when you're visiting the factory, you know, give us half a day at least. It's really worth visiting also these other aspects in this museum, this piece that we saved and we kept for future references. And this is an example of the tour and the events that we organize throughout the year, with, like I said, the majority of the emphasis around the September in conjunction with the Marmo Mac, but also Salone del Mobile is a good time, which should have happened this week. Unfortunately, we are all stuck at home. Otherwise, we'll be in a situation like this at the end of the event. So this is sort of a little bit of a wrap up of my presentation, our presentation. We usually terminate with a little bit of a drink and the music. Unfortunately, we cannot really do it here. You know, I don't think I would recommend me singing, but if you have questions, I think this is probably the right opportunity to, I don't know, interact a little bit, to tell me, to give us some suggestion on how to do it. It's sort of, like I said, our first experience in doing this, so we certainly have way to improve and way to learn. I don't know if you, Maria Vittoria or Giacomo, want to add something. Don't be shy. Maybe you can unmute anybody if they want to intervene, or I don't know if there's some questions that has been posed so far.
For a central location too. Are these gonna, when they eventually get built, are they going to work as one?
It is, because this is not in the code. This is an alternative solution. I had schools before using skylights for classrooms and things like that. That's why I thought this can be acceptable, but she doesn't accept it. She's saying that we have to go for a longer process. Maybe later in the future, let's get this.
Everyone's coming into the same lobby.
Yeah.
It seems like there's some.
Are you getting it?
It's not.
Or is it too confusion?
I don't know.
Probably
a lot of people are shy, so
different
right now,
level of kind of connection and energy.
Everybody
has all the residents were coming in the same.
Wait a minute. Giorgio, sorry, I wasn't getting anything. I don't understand if you did get it.
No, no, I was hearing some background radio, probably
Okay.
something that didn't know that we unmuted everybody. So I
Okay.
think it was good to mute everybody, but
Okay.
guys, if you think you want to intervene, you can, post a chat. We'll
Yeah, that might be the best way.
raise your hand. I don't know if you're familiar with Zoom. Unmute yourself. Like I said, we're not really in a classroom situation where we are teaching and you're listening, but more like in a lounge environment where we want to have a conversation.
Let me just ask and introduce myself. My name is Jay Sackett. My company is Go-To Tile. I'm a Grassi partner in the Midwest. I'm just curious to see if anyone from Chicago has signed in for this this session. Apparently not. Okay.
Jay, we don't really know. We sort of send an email out to a bunch of different people. We didn't really segment it geographically. I would assume a majority of my contacts are in the Northeast. I didn't really went too far out into Chicago. But we would love to do more. If you have contact in Chicago, we can, do another one next week or whenever you think you are ready to do it.
No, I ask this because we did invite at least 100 participants from Chicago. It was a bit late, which is probably the reason that we have a low response from that. But next week we'll try again and begin the process sooner.
I see some comments here. Good, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it and you appreciated the presentation. Like I said, it's not our profession to do this. I have to admit that doing online is actually even more challenging than doing it in person because you don't really see the interaction. Although I now see you in the screen, before I had the screen occupied by the presentation, so I couldn't even see whether you were looking at like you're doing it now or just distracted like sometimes I do when I listen to this presentation. And there's no shame in saying it. I mean, we all know that we have multiple tasking when we're doing it. Other than that, I mean, we would love to have a little bit more of your contacts and feedbacks if you can, so that, Jay is definitely want to follow up. We want to do that too. If you have some other questions, maybe, that sparks up later on, we are here to yeah, go ahead. I mean,
Can you hear me, Giorgio? This is Paul Cocciardi from Alvin and Granite out of Boston.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good, how are you? Hello.
Very good.
Hey, at the very beginning, I didn't hear, or not, somewhere in the beginning, you had mentioned the white Vicenza stone or the Bianco Avorio, you call it. What is that? Or is that like the lightest beige, or is it something different that I wasn't aware of? I didn't quite hear it well at that time.
No, I mean, it's a whitish colors. It's actually very white. I mean, of course, it's not, white like a piece of paper. It's sort of like a milky white.
But not a Pietro Grassi, It's not. It's just you were saying an area of white stone. It had nothing to do with the Pietro Grassi, does it?
Yeah. No, it does. It does.
Okay.
Everything that we are showing here is from Grassi. So we didn't want to make this a selling presentation, but we are more than happy to discuss about catalogs, maybe offline or other things, of course.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I have information. I just don't remember the name Bianco Avorio. So I wasn't sure, but I'll take a look. I have information that I can look afterwards.
Beautiful.
But very nice. It was a good history, which is something that we usually don't get.
Excellent. I'm glad you get it.
Thank you.
So I think we are if there are no more questions, I think we are more or less. First of all, thank you and thank everybody for the time you spent with us. Giorgio, you did a wonderful work. I mean, that was really nice. And it's nice to see your point of view also, a little bit different from ours. And although we are so far, it's the only way that I have to be in contact with you and with all the people over there. So it's a great idea, And I just hope we can join sooner or later here in Italy because well, you're in a wonderful place, but our wine is definitely the best. So you have to come here to try. And So I just invite you here, first time that you are in Italy, remember us, come here, see our quarries, see our nice showroom, and well, that's all. Thank you again for all your time. By the way, this webinar will be put online. So if anybody is interested to, you know, hear something, if they missed, because I see somebody who just joined. So we will send them after an email with a link. You can download it. It won't be today, early next week. And just hope to keep in touch for, you know, any requests that you should have. Thank you for your
Just one word, this Giacomo here speaking from Grassi Pietra, that do remember that Pietra di Vicenza is a natural seller for wine, cheese, any kind of salami, ham, or whatever you like. So you're kindly invited. We work a lot on, for instance, Napa Valley or other wineries, because this is, we haven't talking about how to use the Pietra di Vicenza, but at the very beginning, besides sculptures and architecture, this was used to keep food naturally refrigerated. So keep it in mind.
Excellent. Thanks, Giacomo.
You're welcome.
All right, gents. Well, thank you very much. We'll try to diligently do a follow-up email or call, and maybe, you know, we can have a little bit more interaction later on. Hopefully, we have all this content. Like I said, we're not professional web marketers, but, you know, we are forced to becoming more and more, I suppose. So looking forward to seeing you soon. And let me know if you have any other questions. Some of you also contact me privately. I'll really appreciate that. But I would like this to be more of a like community. So like I said, don't be shy, then reach out to us, Maria, Giacomo, and everybody.
Bravo, Giorgio.
Thank you.
Grazie, ciao.
Ciao, bye-bye.
Ciao, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao, grazie.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we still have a couple of people on the chat, but
Yeah.
there's nothing secret that we need to talk about. I think overall it was, I don't know, you tell me. I mean, I was kind of focusing on the presentation more than listening.
Well, I was very interested in how you reused the quarries at the end. I have to say that was educational for me, and now I want to visit some of those places, that restaurant especially. So,
Nice.
the wine cellar, absolutely.
Well, the wine center, it's great to see, but quite often we do have some kind of dinners there in the quarries. It's nice to be there for sure.
Mm.
Okay. George, I think we're here. Thank you to everybody. I think I'll make...
Thank you for the opportunity. You know, we'll be in touch soon, and looking forward to another event. Have a good weekend.
Just a second, Luca.
Asking when you have got another class.
Okay, we left. Okay, thank you.
All right,
Ciao.
bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.